So I wanted to think about how uncanny the Larry story is. So the way that the bands carried flashes of knowing, even in the bleakest years. For so long, it looked like Harry and Louis had split, that the wall of contracts and silence had smothered what was once an alive connection with such kismet. Some even feared the worst, that maybe they had moved on, maybe they'd been broken, and maybe, God forbid, the whole thing was only ever just a projection. And it was fueled by collective storytelling that created the greatest love story that didn't exist. And that was an existential kind of crisis. And yet the flashes never went away. So that a glance here, a lyric there, the weight of a look across the stage, they said, no, the bond isn't gone. It's buried, hidden, but still intact. And I was thinking, if they ever came forward one day, not under contract pressure, but on their own volition, the joy would be about having been right. Like, it's not about like we were right all along, even though we were, if that happens. It would be about knowing that what had survived was never a ruin, never a mask, never a fall from grace. It was always there, just waiting for daylight. It reminds me of an old story, and I don't know if I'm remembering the plot line properly, and I don't have the time to watch it. But that classic James Bond movie, The Spy Who Loved Me. If I remember correctly, James Bond is this man who builds a legend to survive in a hostile terrain. Unlike Jason Bourne, where Jason Bourne, that was not really his real name. I forget what was Jason Bourne's real name. But anyway, James Bond's real name really was James Bond. And he was, I think there's that, I think the backstory of James Bond is his family home is this kind of castle in Scotland, right? So James Bond was one of those spies that, like, literally he used his own name, right? But even though he used his own name, there was this whole legend around James Bond and each of his missions. So when I think back, if I remember the plot line of The Spy Who Loved Me, and the James Bond sort of arc in general, here's this man who to the outside world looks reckless, fallen, and dangerous, but beneath that, the real man endures, the real psyche, and sort of the woman in the movie, and I cannot remember the name. I believe she's able to see past the mask and does not love the legend, but she loves the glimpses that slip through of the real person, the flashes that prove that he was never really broken, and he was not just a like a conglomerate of a mask, right? So then that's why the Larry story resonates so hard, and here's the connection, because to believe in it year after year is to hold on to those flashes, even when the world insists that you're imagining things. And if they ever did confirm it openly and freely, it would mean that hope was not wasted, that what we thought was lost was not, that survival was the real story all along. And what else would that mean? It means that it's kind of a reversal. Like Agatha Christie was known in her mystery books of, like, suddenly the story turns at the end, and in all that sort of plot twist, the mystery solved. So for years, Larry Stylinson has lived in that strange space between myth and memory, the fans carrying those flashes, little intuitive sparks that something was still there, even when the surface story insisted. Otherwise, we were told, they've broken up, they've moved on, it's ruined, don't look here anymore. And yet the flashes never stop. A lyric, a glance, a coded look across the stage. They whispered, no, not broken. Ruined, not ruined, just hidden. And so the connection to I guess, to the archetype of the Spy Who Loved Me is that you look at similar stories. Think of American TV shows like Law and Order or SVU, Chicago PD, where there's always like an undercover story, and sometimes the man that everyone sees is the legend, and the legend is someone reckless, dangerous, even destructive. And so to the outside, he looks like he's fallen from grace. But beneath the mask is the real man, and he endures, and he wears the chaos like camouflage. And there's always this counterpart, often a female, who sees through it. Again, she's not in love with the wreckage. She's in love with the glimpses that slip through, the discipline in his voice, the haunted truth in his eyes, the details he can't quite keep hidden. She knows even when he looks broken that he is not. And that's the Larry story too. Fans feared the worst. Maybe it really was over. Maybe they'd been forced apart for good. Maybe, God forbid, like I said, it was all projection. But because the flashes didn't stop, and when you live with flashes for so long, you start to realize you are not imagining things, you're catching sight of maybe what's real. So the wasted years, maybe they're not the wasted years. So if they were to come forward again on their own volition, the joy that many a Larry would feel, that I would totally be so happy, would not be about being right, even though we would be. It would be about vindication, which is not the same as being right. It just means that all those years of doubt and grief were not wasted, because what we thought was lost never was. So then that's why for me the story has never been about pity. It's always been about recognition, because when you love someone or something, you don't want them to fall from grace. And you don't want that fall from grace to be the truth. You want to know that survival and thriving was real all along underneath that whole mask, that whole constructed legend. So when I think of Larry, I do think kind of the genre of The Spy Who Loved Me. I think of the man who wore the broken legend to survive and the bond that held because someone could see through it. And that's why if Larry and Louie ever did confirm it as real, officially, the happiness would not come from surprise. It would come from relief, the relief that what lived in the flashes was always real, that survival, not ruin, was the true story. That, and that is enough to know that the bond was not broken, to say it out loud and then let it go. So I think I've gotten a little bit inspired by this speculation about Lemonade, and I think there's a couple of chatter regarding Lemonade and how there's a connection to Lemonade and Harry, but that I kind of have to see where else this unfolds, because it all is just it's kind of a new thing, but there's something in the burst of energy and the brightness of the lemon turning into lemonade from sour to sweet. It's so easy to say, you know what, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. But you know what? That's easier said than done. What would be much better is for somebody to show us how to do it. And who else is the best person to do so but Louis Tomlinson? Exactly. Because time and time again, Louis Tomlinson has demonstrated and embodied that, you know what, this is how you do it. And so that's why One Direction was a godsend for a generation of females, whether they were the same generation or older or younger. That, you know what, there are good men out there. It's Louis.